Welcome to our webinar series for professionals.
So, hi everyone, and I hope you have had, well, at least those of you who's in Europe have had a wonderful summer so far. South Africa is, of course, a little bit different because that's still like winter, something like that. So, anyway, I'm Anne-Catherine, co-founder of Nordic Laboratories and DNA Life, where we are dedicated to change healthcare through functional medicine and personalized medicine and N equals 1 and personalized, person-centered treatments, etc. So, of course, we are talking about lab tests today, or supplements as well, it could be. And you can find the products in your VMS portal and reach out to us if you need any help. Just if any of you are sitting there missing Brocolux, then it's soon to be on our shelves. Yeah, I think this week. It looks as if you can already order it, and then we'll just ship out. And I think we should have it tomorrow. So all great. So today I've actually really looked forward to this presentation with the DNA resilience that Helen Gautschi, my wonderful colleague, is going to do for us, because it's neurotransmitters, it's mood, it's energy, it's resilience, it's capability, it's relations, it's there's so much in this test that can give us information as to who we are, all the people that we are working with, who they are, and hints and nudges to what to do when things aren't exactly high scoring and like looking great all the time. So Helen, you're a dietitian and you are soon. You haven't finished your master's yet?
Not yet, no. Getting there.
Nearly over.
It's a long road. Yeah.
We need the credentials as well, and it allows us to work deep with topics that we really enjoy. And in your case, it's genetics. That's your baby. So I'm going to pass the stage on to you, and I'll mute myself. And as usual, we do record. So we will share the recording in case you have to leave a little early. We also share the slides and mail as soon as we can. And you can ask questions in the chat. I'll see if I can answer. If not, then we have time for Q&A at the end. So Helen, the stage is yours.
Thanks so much, Anne-Catherine. Thanks everyone for joining this afternoon. This is, as Anne-Catherine said, it's a really interesting test. It's got a lot of information in it, and definitely does do that nudging, does give you that introspection, especially if you look to do it on yourselves and then consider, and then from there looking at doing it on your patients as well. I think it just provides a lot of information that helps for you to understand your patient better when using any of the other DNA tests alongside DNA resilience or in isolation. This test provides a great perspective on how you're going to treat your patient, where they might be, have their strengths and where they really do have their weaknesses and where you would like to target. So today I'm going to try and make it as practical as possible, going through what the report is, as well as really what you can get from it by going through a case study. So starting off, I think something that has been the buzzword for the last 2 years is resilience. It's coming up more and more because of what we've all been through, and something that is really important to actually improve on in oneself and for your patients. We can't get health without having good resilience. So when we're talking about resilience, really, what is it? So we've got a few nice definitions coming from some of the medical dictionaries, some of the health sites. Looking at what resilience is, it's defined as the ability to adapt to stress while maintaining healthy mental and physical performance. And I think that's one of the nicest definitions. It's not having no stress, it's being able to adapt to stress, keeping healthy both physically and mentally. The American Psychological Association defines resilience as the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats or significant sources of stress, such as family and relationship problems, serious health problems, or workplace and financial stresses. And this one I just really like. It's bouncing back from a difficult experience. It's not just grinning and bearing it. That's not what we want to do. We want to actually be able to understand what we've gone through, be able to reflect on when things are negative and adverse events, but be able to maintain good performance in our workplace. And not only that, but then actually bring that performance back to our family, back to our social environment, and be able to thrive in each of those spheres. So not just, if you look at some top executives, they might be doing really well in that space, but if you then take them home and into the interpersonal relationships, it's not that good. And when we're looking at this overall area of resilience, it's being able to thrive in every single sphere of your life. And this actually, an article and many articles actually being published since the big pandemic, looking at resilience in different areas, from our healthcare practitioners, a big area, but even sort of before then, this was being written, looking at genetics of resilience. So it's not just genetics and of sort of mood disorders as such, but more actually genetics of stress management, looking at, if we don't manage our stress well, how it can lead to mood disorders. But if we can catch it earlier, what is that stress response system doing from one individual to the other? And this was just a really nice review article. I think that is open access, and you can get it from us. And just looking at the abstract and some of the information that was provided in this, we were able to really extract the key genes that have been reviewed a lot in the literature. And some of them looking at COMT, SLC6A4, looking at your serotonergic systems, your dopaminergic systems, NPY, which we're going to go through. And these genes all suggest a gene-environment interaction. So that's really what I want to highlight from this study and all of the other studies that we look at, is that it's not just our genes, but it's what we've been exposed to in our environment as well. And if we're exposed to adverse events with sort of weaknesses in these genes, we are more prone to a decreased stress management persona, phenotype. But you can do a lot from your environment as well, looking at a supportive environment to actually decrease those risks and target those pathways where you do have genetic weakness. And that's what we're looking to do with DNA resilience. And something that I just want to highlight, and we have spoken about or just touched on already, is when we're looking at resilient stress management, I mentioned you can't have good health without having good resilience. And so when you're thinking of resilience, we need to make sure that we are really supporting this area. How can we manage stress as best as possible to decrease risk for cardiovascular diseases, insulin resistance, cognitive decline, looking at immune function and gut dysbiosis? We know that if we're thinking about our stress response and IBS, or even just you feel it in your gut, it's that gut feeling, and that comes from stress and how you manage stress. And then the more obvious ones, looking at risk for PTSD, depression, and anxiety coming through if we are not managing this area appropriately. So looking at all of these different areas, I had a client come through. So this is very interesting case, quite a complex case, and working on on managing it. But it's this 35-year-old female. She is a doctor. She works in casualty, so she's got this shift work, and that being a big stressor for her, that she doesn't have fixed hours of work, so it's quite haphazard. And the other thing is she's seeing things that are could be quite light. You know, it's the the person on the weekend who goes into the medical center and just might have a sniffle, and so having to deal with that, to something that's really serious, seeing the big traumas coming through as well, and wanting to make sure that every patient is looked after as well as possible. So this is, from her perspective, just something that she really wants to do a job as well as possible, but she is struggling to just make sure that she is caring for every patient, and really helping them as well as possible. It's a kind of a big personality component for her. In the last 6 months, she had rapid weight loss, and this was due to very busy workload and not being able to eat, but also just major stress leading to weight loss. She suffers from a lot of gastrointestinal concerns. The doctors haven't really been able to put their finger on it. From IBS, but extreme sort of burning, not actually reflux, and they're not quite sure what it is, nausea. But she also has feelings of sometimes feeling lost, doesn't know if she's followed the right career path, overwhelmed, she has poor sleep. So all of these symptoms showing that her stress management is not really doing so well. From a diet and lifestyle perspective, she does little to no exercise. She tries to be gluten and lactose free because that has, in the past, when she has followed a stricter diet, she has managed to sort of suppress a lot of or relieve a lot of these gastrointestinal symptoms. But she does tend to, going gluten-free, go down the route of more refined carbohydrates. She eats a lot of red meat, and then she has, in terms of her greens, she enjoys her salad, not so much vegetables, and that she would do at lunch and dinner with a commercial salad dressing. So it's not really a good quality oil, and loaded with sugar and salt. And then she drinks wine daily, and that, she says, relieves a lot of the stress after a long day. Her goals are to really improve her health, to become and feel successful at work, to feel happy at work, and also to just work on and improve her personal relationships. So she came through, she did the battery of tests, but this one really resonated with her, and we got a lot of information from this for her. And so when we're looking at her specifically, what we're able to do with this test is get insight into these 7 molecular areas to optimize stress management for improved performance. So we're looking at genetic variants in neuropeptide Y, oxytocin, your brain-derived neurotrophic factor, your neurotrophins, your stress axis, norepinephrine, dopamine, and serotonin. And combining these areas, and looking at these areas separately, and then looking at how they interplay with one another, we can provide really personalized interventions with regards to lifestyle, things like yoga and deep breathing, diet, what type of diet plan should she be following, nutraceuticals that she should be taking in, and exactly the types of exercise that would optimize these pathways for better stress management. And so basically taking this information, what we were able to look at for her, when we looked at the DNA resilience report, we got these outcomes. So this is, I wanted to, if we had more time, I wanted to do a few cases and bring up mine versus what we saw with hers, and really be able to show how different combinations do come through. So just giving an insight for this individual, not every person will come up like this. When we're looking at this page, what we're able to see is when you've got a low score, it means genetically you have a lot of weakness in that area. So genetic potential, we want to fill that right up to get high. And how we're going to fill it up is with diet, lifestyle, environmental interventions. And so we see with her, there are quite a few areas that are low that we really need to fill that cup up with the correct environment for her. And where she's got strengths is in these high areas in brain-derived neurotrophic factor and norepinephrine. So we want to try and sort of rest on those quite a lot, but at the same time, we can see that from those 7 molecular areas, she's got a lot of areas that are quite weak. And it's quite interesting to see, we actually did a sibling of hers as well, very similar results, but he was following a lot of the correct interventions already. He'd gone through some stressful events 3 years prior to her and had really taken action and changed a lot of his behaviors. And phenotypically, his resilience is so much better than hers, and his health is so much better than hers, similar genetic results. And because she's just environmentally not doing what she needs to be doing at this stage, and what we want to get to is really a place where she is really thriving, based on how we can really intervene with each of these areas. So the areas that we're going to focus on, it's a big one, is neuropeptide Y, oxytocin, the stress axis, and oxytocin and the stress axis, they go hand in hand. So when we optimize one, we really can support the other. And then obviously dopamine being so important in stress management, as well as your serotonergic system that needs support for her. So these results, or this score, comes and then translates into diet, supplement, exercise, and lifestyle advice that we give in a summary recommendation page. It's really very practical, very user-friendly for this patient then to take home. It's a lot of information, even in the summary page, I admit that. So what we do from here is I would highlight, based on what she's come in with, based on where she's at and what she's able to change. We do a step-by-step process, highlighting where there's a lot of overlap. We can see Mediterranean style diet popping up more and more. So we start highlighting, okay, well, this is probably the key take-home message for her. What is she doing diet-wise that we don't need supplements for, and what is she not doing that we need to then look at the supplementation, and then obviously on the exercise and the lifestyle side, really where are we going to get the strongest outcomes, or the fill up that cup as quickly as possible with what she's ready to do, and we can take it on a step-by-step basis. But this is something she can keep at her bedside table, on her refrigerator, and every day when she opens up, when she's going to do a shopping list, she can look at this and say, okay, these are the focus foods I'm going to work on, and these are the supplements I need to be reminded to take every day. I'm going to look at an exercise program that contains these specific types of exercises. And then obviously from the lifestyle point of view, we're going to go into that in quite a lot of detail, because there is just so much in this report that we can do from the environmental point of view. So starting off with neuropeptide Y, this is a gene that is new to our report and our offering. It's reported in our DNA resilience test. And what we see with NPY, it encodes neuropeptide Y. It's really important in managing inflammation, in appetite control, and when one is under stress, this gene should be increasing in expression to help suppress any of those stress hormones, or help balance those stress hormones, so that we don't get a major inflammatory response, and we can balance out that anxiety. So it's an anxiolytic gene. We want it around. How it works, so this is just a little schematic indicating the main effects exerted by, and this image was actually taken from an article looking at traumatic brain injuries, but the other one's looking at emotional, psychosocial stress response as well. And we know pretty much with a brain injury, but also with just environmental stress, that we get kind of downstream an increased expression of IL-1 beta, which is a pro-inflammatory cytokine. And what we see is when there's this increased expression of IL-1 beta, it actually triggers NPY to be expressed as well. And NPY helps to suppress or just balance out how much IL-1 beta is being expressed, because IL-1 beta is very pro-inflammatory and can cause damage to a host of tissues around the body. And we really want to manage how much of that is is around. And what we have is this fantastic gene helping with this increased expression. It helps with increased proliferation, maturation of cells, differentiation, which is really important, and then integration and communication of different cells. It also helps with new nerve and blood vessel growth, and then also through that helps with the modulation of neurogenesis. So really very, very important in neuron signaling and differentiation of neurons. So a very nice gene to have around. Something that, and I'm just going to show you some of these points here. NPY protects against your stress-induced depression, worry, and anxiety, helps one to perform better mentally and physically under pressure, involved in pain reduction by counteracting a lot of your stress hormones, and decreases your brain sensitivity to leptin. So there's a bit of a caveat with this one, which I'll get to in the actual results. So if you have very good expression of NPY, it actually triggers appetite. And under stress, if you've got a lot of NPY expression, you may be that kind of stress eater. Whereas the lower expression found with a genetic variant, you that individual who may go into, I'm not hungry when I'm stressed, don't eat, and weight loss during stress. And for her, this fit perfectly. She had this variant showing increased, lower expression of NPY, poor appetite during stress, so major weight loss, and then also this really affecting your or having a major effect and connection with your gut-brain axis. So a healthy gut microbiome helps with neuropeptide Y expression via the vagal nerve. So there's a very strong connection between gut health and what's happening in the brain through the vagal nerve and connecting that to neuropeptide Y. So if you consider she's got poor gut health and she's got a genetic variant on neuropeptide Y, meaning possibly even lower expression of this protective stress gene. In terms of what we can do about it, from the recommendations, we want to limit intake of animal protein. So some of the research has shown that a more plant-based diet, especially looking at your dark green leafy vegetables, high in folate, helps to increase expression of neuropeptide Y. Some studies showing that intermittent fasting or caloric restriction will also help with the expression of neuropeptide Y. So that's from the dietary perspective. We also see that there's certain supplements, again, looking at the folates, methylfolate, curcumin being advantageous for expression of neuropeptide Y. And then just regular exercise, nothing really showing any major effects from the environmental side on increasing this expression. So mainly coming from diet and supplementation, and then very much so from your lifestyle side is how can we improve vagal tone to improve expression of this NPY gene. And one of the interesting ways that this has been studied is your cold water immersion, or having a cold shower, plunging into a very cold pool, or if you're close to a nice cold sea, that's a great way to do it as well. That cold water immersion has been shown to activate your vagal nerve, improve vagal tone, and significantly increase expression of NPY. So this was one of the lifestyle components that we were going to really focus on for her, the different ways in which we could improve vagal tone and thus increase NPY expression. So that was first for her. The next one that came out was oxytocin. Looking at what you would see in the report of this, where you going through the report, you would see that she has this low genetic or low genetic potential, almost meaning that there's a big cup to fill up with the right environmental contributors, the right environmental interventions, and showing that for her, she's this AA genotype, which is quite rare. We see GA a lot, not so much AA. So when we're looking at oxytocin, this is the oxytocin receptor. We know oxytocin is like the love hormone, the touch hormone. It's strongly expressed in moms during childbirth with breastfeeding, and any positive physical touch, you get this great expression of oxytocin, and that's what you want. And besides just this love feeling that you get from it, it's also been shown to be very important in suppressing inflammation and also balancing out a lot of your other stress hormones. So very important to have high amounts of this. What we see with her genotype is that this receptor isn't really hearing this oxytocin coming in as well. And so we may need to try and push up this oxytocin a little bit more to help with this receptor to hear this oxytocin coming in. And so the strengths associated with this receptor is that, in fact, actually, so this is where it might have helped her a little bit, where isolation and solitude don't seem to take the same toll on AA genotypes versus someone who's a GG genotype, who's much more loving, who enjoys social interaction. They get energy and they really thrive off social interaction, whereas AA genotypes, especially under stressful conditions, do not manage social interaction as well. They don't really recognize facial expressions as well, and may not sort of be a good kind of leader in those situations, because they don't empathize with individuals as well in very stressful situations, which for her, now thinking about what she's doing as a profession, we need to see how she can just have some introspection on this, understand that in those stressful situations, we need to see how we can improve her empathy, improve her interactions under very stressful conditions, because she may be the person to act out and not manage that, so those stressful situations as well. And so what we see in terms of the hurdles with her, stress and major pressure can increase your risk of mood disorders, but also that poor social interaction within those stressful situations. So she might become quite short with individuals in those very stressful situations. And that's something that we may not want with her career path. And so what we see and how we can really improve this, there's the dietary side is looking at just really plant-based focused foods, again, lots of greens, and looking at your vitamin C rich foods that helps with oxytocin receptor sensitivity. And also looking at magnesium just for that stress response. But really where we want to focus, and we saw the dog, someone has the dog sitting there with them today. That's actually one of the wonderful ways in which we can improve oxytocin function is actually having a pet. Animal therapy, she used to do a lot of horse riding before she became really busy, and that's something we really want to advocate for her again. Is that's a fantastic way that she can actually improve her oxytocin. She's going to get into the natural environment, which we will speak about when we get to serotonin, but getting on an animal or having positive relations with animals is a fantastic way to help with oxytocin production, help with this receptor function, and especially if she may get very stressed out with interpersonal relations. So that animal therapy is going to be really beneficial for her. So something we really want to look at. Other things is focus on, and for her to identify her support network and look at then helping with positive physical touch within her close support network that she trusts. Debriefing after stressful days is very, very important as well to that social support network. Then another one is actually making a conscious effort to show more compassion, care, and support and empathy. Her job entails this, but outside of her job that might be very stressful and a cause of stress, looking at where she might be able to go to an animal shelter or getting involved in some kind of charity work. These pro-social acts these have been shown to significantly increase oxytocin. So rich information that she, with a lot of introspection, this was one of the areas that she really got a lot of, I I think just it made her feel a lot more comforted in this area, and she got a lot of really practical advice that she could use on a day-to-day basis. So this is something, and one area that by increasing this helps with actually the next area. So I've actually spoken about all of these points, so you can just keep them in mind when you get the presentation. Looking at oxytocin in decreasing inflammation, and also helping increasing serotonin and BDNF expression. We know BDNF is strong with her, so we want to just further support that. And so that would be something that we can really rest on for her. Getting onto BDNF, speaking about how good oxytocin production can help with BDNF expression. She actually already genotypically has good BDNF expression. But other things that we would want to just keep in mind with this is looking at how we can ensure good vitamin D levels, omega-3, getting out into that natural environment, and actually getting some higher intensity exercise will help with the brain-derived neurotrophic factor expression, which in high amounts can really help with, again, cell signaling within your neurons, which is very important for stress management, especially managing or decreasing risk of anxiety induced by a lot of stress. And this is something that she's really facing. So we want to see how we can support BDNF as much as possible, even though she doesn't have the risk genotype. Because of all these other areas that are not working for her, we want to focus on this for her as well. Looking at, again, the marriage between oxytocin now and the stress axis, we know that by building oxytocin, we can alleviate these stress hormones a lot. And this is another area where she needs to really fill up that cup with the right environment for her genes. We see where she's got some variants on a gene called CRHR. So CRHR encodes your corticotropin releasing hormone receptor. Very important, your corticotropins, your stress hormone family, and this receptor working on overdrive now. So really being able to detect those stress hormones very quickly and have a major stress response to them. It's where we see the risk is with the CC and GG genotype being associated with this altered cortisol response to psychosocial stress, and leading these individuals to be much more vulnerable to the negative effects of stress. And so based on that, we want to see how we can, one, reduce or just modulate receptor function, support oxytocin again, which will decrease a lot of the stress hormones, and then help with other ways in which we can reduce these stress hormones. So for her, because of these risk genotypes, there is this greater fear response to demanding and challenging circumstances. Her current position is kind of just driving this further, especially because she is not managing these stressful situations very well. And she's got a heightened stress response, a heightened cortisol response. A very interesting study that looked at acute stress for adults, just general adult population. They put these individuals into a stressful interview situation. And they measured cortisol pre and post this very stressful interview, and they measured the genotypes as well. And what they were able to find is those individuals with the risk genotypes had a significantly higher spike in cortisol during this acute stressful situation, this acute interview, stressful interview, and they were the ones obviously with the risk genotypes. But when these individuals were more aware of their genotypes, when they started to put into place debriefing techniques post these acute stressful interviews, the next time they were faced with a stressful event, there wasn't such an extreme spike in all of these stress hormones. So being aware of stressful situations, is so important for these individuals. With regards to the stress axis, we really want to focus on how we can really manage the diet. So avoiding processed sugars, limiting alcohol, it actually just plays around with the stress hormones even further. She's not a kind of a binge eater during stressful events, but what she is going to when she is hungry and she needs that bit of energy is not really healthy types of foods. It's a lot of refined carbohydrates. It is your more processed and refined sugars. So that is something that we really want to focus on for her. And by doing so, we're also going to help support the gut by avoiding these processed foods. Limiting alcohol is going to be very important for really alleviating the stress response. Reducing intake of coffee and other stimulants, taking care around food intolerances, which is very, very important, especially when she's got all of these stress hormones kind of driving her everyday life. Food intolerances are going to be much more important to avoid. And so she really needs to get back on track with assessing what her food intolerances are, possibly going on an elimination diet to really assess that over a long period of time, and to get her gut to a really healthy place, including a greater variety in her diet, lots of vegetables, seasonal fruits, everything hypoallergenic grains, and then things like green tea and cacao, dark chocolate, from time to time will also help with the stress response and just kind of modulating this receptor function. And so from the diet, we would be able to support that from the supplement point of view with zinc, magnesium, vitamin C, and omega-3 fatty acids. So managing your stress response is really important via your omega-3s and really balancing those omega-3s and omega-6s. So really important from that point of view. From the exercise point of view, high intensity exercise has been shown to be extremely beneficial for these individuals. So something we really want to focus on for her. And from the lifestyle point of view, looking at things like reframing. So this is where we are able to, it's a technique that one has to develop. And so suggesting a counselor or psychologist for her to work through this with her is being able to view stress and demanding or adverse situations in a positive light and be able to use each of those situations of adversity as a growth opportunity. There are some individuals with certain genotypes that are better at actually developing this technique compared to others. So individuals such as with the DRD2, actually the risk genotype, the TT genotype, looking at some COMT genotypes are not as good at actually developing this reframing technique. So it's always very useful to have that in mind as well. So how much are we going to be able to focus on building a technique based on the predisposition from that genotype? So for her, we know, and when we get into it, we'll see that reframing will work really nicely for her. Again, looking at that vagal tone and vagal activities, and the single most important regulating measure to really help with the stress axis, especially from the gut to the brain. So looking at meditation, the breathing exercises, again, the cold water immersion coming through there, and thinking about incorporating relaxing music. So when she is at work or she has experienced a stressful situation, if she can just take a 2-minute breather, put on some relaxing music, use a calming app or two that she can just do some meditation with calming music, and deep breathing is really going to help with this stress response. So that being a very, very important one. And lots that we can take home from this area that we will summarize at the end again. Then looking at her other area where she's got the only other area where she has good potential from the genetic side or already kind of cup full is looking at her norepinephrine, and where we see that the CC individuals show strong emotional footing during a challenging and demanding situation. So this is where she's probably falling back on this area more than she should be, and it's probably just not actually at the end of the day so strong because of the many other areas that are weak. So genetically, she's good in this area, and she's using this as her fallback, this kind of driving factor, this norepinephrine, this noradrenaline, to keep her going through stressful and demanding situations. But too much of this all the time is going to lead to an overdrive in other systems that we don't want. So beneficial when we're looking at it in isolation, but considering how many weaknesses she has, we want to really focus on how we can build up those other areas, that she's not only relying on this area and on BDNF, which is probably also under a lot of strain because she is so very stressed. But overall, that's at least the one area that we don't need to focus on too much for her. Getting then from actually dopamine that creates, that then follows through to the norepinephrine, but dopamine really important from a cognitive point of view. We want dopamine for good cognitive function, which is really important for her. And we also want to ensure that there's just the right amount of dopamine, not too much, not too little. So from the genes we're looking at, it's your DRD2 or DRD4, which are your dopamine receptors, and then COMT, which breaks down your dopamine. So we know that dopamine is often considered an excitatory neurotransmitter, very important in modulating reward and pleasure, but also extremely important for cognitive function and working memory. So we want this when she is under pressure. Some very interesting studies, in fact, showing that this AA genotype that she has here actually puts her more as kind of a she's more an A-type personality, and because of this, so AA genotypes are known to be more A-type in their personality, but at the same time may suffer from a lot of anxiety because of almost the A-type personality. So there's a double-edged sword for this one. What we see is dopamine is an important contributor to the generation of your stress response, your coping responses, and especially when there are a lot of environmental stresses, both physical and psychological, they can activate this brain dopaminergic circuit, which can lead to acute and then chronic changes depending on how long you're being exposed to this chronic stressor, or if it's a very major acute stressor, it can completely alter this dopaminergic system. And if you are then at a genetic weakness because of variants that you carry, you may be at increased risk for a poor stress response, increased risk of anxiety, and lower resilience overall. What this image is showing you is just really how dopamine is produced, the enzymes and the transporters involved. We need tyrosine to create dopamine, and then we have this dopamine in the synaptic cleft that then needs to attach to your different receptors. This one showing the D2, the D4 receptor would also be on this postsynaptic neuron. And these receptors are very strongly modulated, in fact, by vitamin D and omega-3 fatty acids. So very important to keep that in mind when we're wanting to make these receptors more sensitive. We're actually looking at especially vitamin D, and vitamin D levels being so important for dopaminergic function. So where she came up with a risk was on DRD4 and COMT. First, looking at DRD4, we see that individuals with her genotype are very responsive to environmental input. So from a strength point of view, we can really fill up that cup. But under stressful and demanding conditions, if she's not putting in the correct environmental interventions, she may be more prone to depression, impaired memory, novelty-seeking behaviors. So she might be kind of more in her off job, off duty. She may be looking at more novelty seeking events, sort of risk behaviors. She does sometimes enjoy that kind of, she used to do horse riding and go really fast over very big jumps. That's going to give you a major dopamine rush. So it all kind of makes sense for her. But at the same time, we want to look at how we can really just balance out this receptor and modulate this receptor for improved functioning, so that she doesn't have these hurdles, this the short temper, the poor emotional response under stress, which is a big one when it comes to when it comes to her stress, especially in her job. She needs to be able to manage that stress and be able to communicate properly with both patients and her co-workers. So very important that we focus on how we can modulate this receptor. When we're looking at your DRD4 recommendations, it's looking at how we can build up the dopamine to be available in the right amounts. And so that's the increase of your tyrosine-rich foods. We also could consider, and this is now where you have to consider overall holistically what we would be doing. If we only had dopamine, DRD4 as an issue, we could actually look at caffeinated beverages, which might actually slow the breakdown of dopamine. But because she has the COMT genotype, we're not going to include this recommendation for her. And we want to focus on her dark green leafy vegetables, her folate-rich foods from there, as well as her fatty fish to make the receptor more functional. So the dark green leafy vegetables, the folate, really important to help create the dopamine, the omega-3 fatty acids for the receptor function. From the supplement point of view, speaking again about where we need to really focus on omega-3 fatty acids, B complex, vitamin D, as I mentioned, really important in promoting dopamine production. Probiotics, especially your L-plantarum, has been shown to improve mood and resilience in individuals, especially with genetic variants. Resveratrol and curcumin helping with these receptor modulation as well. And then lastly, on the lifestyle point of view that we really want to focus on is meditation, helping with dopamine production. Massage and physical therapy is extremely beneficial for improving dopamine production, and then also listening to enjoyable music. So those are all very healthy, natural ways in which we can help with dopamine production and just the receptor function that will then help with stress management and how she communicates in these stressful situations. And then looking at COMT, where she's actually got this AA genotype, this A-type personality genotype, which is really beneficial in many ways. But when it comes to excessive stress, these excessive possible stress hormones, as well as norepinephrine and epinephrine that is produced with stress, is negative for her because the AA genotype is so much slower at breaking down those stress hormones. So when we're looking at how we can really support COMT, we're looking at cruciferous vegetables, which can help with support of COMT function. We need to look at flaxseed, which also helps with just actually balancing COMT function and overall what is going through COMT. It just relieves what needs to be broken down by COMT. Eliminating the caffeinated foods, and that's going to be a big one for her, and then avoiding again all of these processed refined foods that come in very strongly in her diet, and we need to get rid of those. From the supplementation point of view, it's looking at the magnesium and sulforaphane, probably going to be the biggest ones when we're considering COMT support. And then from the lifestyle point of view, looking at good sleep hygiene, managing weight, reducing body fat percentage, very important to reduce the load on COMT. And then again, the meditation and deep breathing is going to help with just reducing the load on COMT through reducing the stress hormone production. So that's a very, very important one that we want to really emphasize for her. Lastly, what came up was serotonin, and you can see in the serotonergic system, she has variants on every single gene that we're testing. So from a genetic point of view, she really has a lot of weakness. You may find another healthcare practitioner in exactly the same situation as her with a very similar background to her. She has a very supportive environment, didn't go through major stresses through her childhood, but genetically, she has a lot of weakness, and faced with this now very stressful, chronic stressful situation, she is not coping. So genetically, she needs to be, we need to find ways to support her more. So looking at serotonin, we know it's your happy hormone. It's primarily found in your gut, and then obviously in blood platelets, and then your central nervous system. What happens in the gut, even though the serotonin in the gut cannot cross the blood-brain barrier, there's major connections through what happens in the serotonin in the gut via the vagal nerve to communicate with how genes are expressed, how serotonin is expressed actually within the brain. So it's a very important modulator of mood, contributing towards feelings of well-being and happiness. And we know that low levels of serotonin are associated with mood disorders, and especially strongly associated with stress-induced anxiety and depression. So from her point of view, you could look at these each of these genes in isolation, but they actually all going to be coming up with the same information at the end of the day, showing these hurdles around increased likelihood of depression associated with lower BDNF levels, lower levels of GABA, which is your counterfeit kind of gene when it comes to reducing your stress hormones. So you want GABA around, and we see that this specific genotype, there's lower BDNF and lower GABA, which is very important to keep in mind for her. And I'm not going to go through each of these in detail on their own, because when we're looking at serotonin, it's actually nice to get it as a holistic point of view, and the information is going to be the same throughout. So I'm actually going to skip to this HTT-LPR to discuss it all, where again we see with the variants there is going to be this much higher risk for stress-induced anxiety, depression, poor resilience, and how we manage it. Well, the Mediterranean style diet has actually been shown to be one of the best diets to support serotonin function as well as mood overall. A high intake of plant-based foods, looking at your foods that are high in folate, magnesium to support your serotonergic functioning. What has also been found in some studies that intermittent fasting may be beneficial. Looking at then your supplements after your diet is your omega-3 fatty acids, your magnesium, and your vitamin C, very important for the expression of these genes. And then looking at exercise is a very important intervention. Your moderate intensity as well as high intensity exercise, so actually a good combination of both, will support serotonin production. And then lastly, looking at lifestyle, I said I would mention it again, but really important to get out into nature daily if possible. That has been shown to improve gut health as well as your serotonin production. So just being in the natural environment, we want to get her out and get her a pet or get her into horse riding again, where she is in a natural environment, and actually through that animal therapy helping produce the oxytocin and the serotonin, and through the natural environment help with gut health as well. So very, very useful intervention on supporting serotonin. So I'm not going to go through each of these recommendations separately, but you would see in the report each of them are explained in detail, where you can get these diet, lifestyle, exercise, and supplement recommendations for every single gene. But what I want to end off with is, because it was a big report, a lot of information, I wanted to highlight how to bring it all together. And what I mentioned was looking at that summary page and obviously going through step by step with her through the report where she has the weaknesses in the genes, what is going to target those genes specifically, and a pathway as a whole, and how we can kind of compile it into something that she can use to go forward, and that is manageable for her. So we're going to look at how we can create a diet plan that is very much Mediterranean in its style, plant-based, good omega-3 fatty acids, leaving out the modern Western influences, avoiding processed and fried foods, and limiting caffeine, with these focus foods being the green leafy vegetables, really trying to up the cruciferous vegetables, which was not part of her diet at all, as well as magnesium and vitamin C rich foods on a daily basis, and including a lot more fatty fish, and replacing that fatty fish instead of having the high red meat intake. Looking at supplements, we want to consider a good quality vitamin B complex, vitamin C, magnesium, vitamin D coming through for so many of these areas, as well as your omega-3 fatty acids, a very good quality multi-strain probiotic, and sulforaphane. It's quite a list, but for her, because of where she's at, her diet is not really good. We do want to do all of this. From the exercise point of view, moderate intensity exercise, we're looking at swimming 20 to 40 minutes 3 times weekly. We can also get into the horse riding that she was very keen on again, high intensity training twice weekly, and then yoga. If we could get it to daily, that would be fantastic. And then from a lifestyle point of view, this is actually really where we want to focus a lot for her. Avoiding the alcohol and environmental toxins, her being aware that alcohol being a big crutch, vagal activation through meditation, deep breathing, cold water immersion, frequent nature exposure, practicing reframing, identifying that support network that she does have, but actually relying on them. And then the animal therapy through, she was going to look at getting a kitten, but then also the horse riding being so important for her. So of all of these areas, just so important to, I think, for her to start off with where she could look at lifestyle, to start integrating that into her everyday life, and then just doing a kind of overhaul of her diet and introducing key supplementation, which would support these very important priority areas, which was most of it. So chose quite a big one, so hopefully give you an idea of all of the areas. And hopefully then from this, you understand why and when resilience, DNA resilience is useful, and that it's really, in a nutshell, for better stress management, for better performance in every sphere of your life, from leading more effectively in your practice or in business, to sport, to interpersonal relations, coping better under day-to-day stressful and demanding conditions, and enhancing mental, emotional, and physical health to be able to be the best you can be, and living up to your fullest potential. So that's just a case study in a nutshell to introduce you or to emphasize the importance of DNA resilience. And for more information on this test, there is in fact a course that is available, an online course where we go into each of the areas in much more detail, providing the science to back each of these recommendations that we include in the DNA resilience report. So thank you so much. That's all from me. I do see some questions, but I'm going to stop my sharing, and don't know, and Catherine, if we have time.
Oh yeah, there is time. So if you're interested in doing the DNA resilience course, then you can find it in VMS under education up in the right hand corner. There's like further education, and you can log into the website and you can purchase it there. I will also make sure that we send out a link to the product so that you can have a little bit of a look there to see if it's something that you want to do. So a few questions came up, one from Diana, where I can read it up. I'm not sure well, I don't know, you might know something about the norepinephrine and low dopamine, if there's a double whammy for that, and then if you're copper dominant, maybe downstream estrogen dominant. Do you have any comments to that, or do we need to get back to Diana somehow?
Yeah, so I can copper it's one of the cofactors that is required to produce norepinephrine. So that's where obviously the copper coming through, and then definitely if you've got a lot of estrogens and your estrogen breakdown products, your 2 and 4 and 16 hydroxy estrogens, they also need to go through COMT. So there'll be a huge load on COMT that it needs to deal with. So definitely how you're able to support COMT, and that's where the sulforaphane comes in, that's where the weight management comes in, and definitely looking at this from a holistic point of view, doing DNA resilience with DNA estrogen something, as well as some of the other functional tests, getting really good insight as to what is happening at that point in time, as well as what is happening downstream and upstream. And then from the norepinephrine and low dopamine side, that would be kind of a double whammy. In her case, we actually see that because of the genetic variants that she has, she's actually not being able to break down the dopamine. So it's almost the other side, and it's quite complicated with how the autoreceptors work, and actually looking at the genetic variants. Interestingly, the DRD2 TT genotype actually showing lower DRD2 density. So the dopamine kind of builds up in that presynaptic cleft. And then what happens is COMT is sitting there, not being able to break it down as quickly. So that dopamine is actually kind of then being not taken up how it should be, so that pleasure response isn't happening. It's sitting there for a long period of time, and it can be converted to your norepinephrine, and then COMT is having to deal with all of it. So it's almost where the dopamine is sitting, more than being able to say high or low levels, because then that dopamine gets converted to the norepinephrine, which makes you this kind of person. And yes, if you've got lots of copper and you're estrogen dominant, there's more load on COMT.
So that also, just like with test pairing, you said the DNA estrogen, but also the Dutch is a nice pair with this, because you get the different information on the functional test as well. So then Absolutely. A question comes up on sauna in regards to dopamine, if sauna use increases dopamine.
It does.
So shifting from cold immersions to sauna and back and
yeah. if you're brave, it's a good thing to do, definitely.
And then what else comes up? Oh, I have a dog outside barking. That's just really thank you messages. So yeah, but it was nice to see how you answered Diana's question in and how it's nice to deep dive further into this in order to get the puzzles in the puzzle to the pieces in the puzzle to match together and understand the biochemistry a lot further. So of course, doing this course and having the information from DNA Mind and DNA Health and Dutch, etc., is just really extra bonus information, so you can work a lot more with your patients. I noticed that you said meditation, that like self-caring meditation, is it referring to something specific, or like a special meditation, or?
So there are different types of meditation. Obviously, the loving kindness meditation. There's some great kind of gurus that one can look up really just on the internet. There's some fantastic apps that also are able to give insight into how to practice the different types of meditation. And I mean, yeah, I've got one or two apps that are just really great if you're thinking now technology, but it's a really great way to help with being able to practice that. So it's that loving kindness specifically. And that helps a lot with the oxytocin and just the stress management side. So definitely a lot with oxytocin. So yeah, self-care, being able to
I'll see if I can get the link out of you, and then maybe we can share it with the presentation as well.
I will.
Nice to have these hand-on tools that we can provide our patients with, so that they know exactly what to do.
Yes. So actually, so what we did choose to do, because a lot of these recommendations are so specific, and sometimes we say, well, loving kindness meditation or deep breathing or something like that, but it takes almost a professional in that area to be able to actually advise on it. So what we did within the DNA Resilience course, the online course, and I can try and share some of those links through there, and I'm sure there are other practitioners who have a special interest in this who could provide further information. But in the course, we've actually got some recordings of deep breathing practitioners, meditation practitioners who give a little crash course on how to do it.
That's
which
very
is quite
nice.
nice.
So nudge, further educate yourself. Now we're getting hungry for more knowledge. Excellent. Well, Helen, thank you very much for your presentation. I can see you're getting a lot of appraisals, and I understand why, because it was a very, very good presentation. And we will see you soon again in regards to the new tests that we are launching on DNA pain. So yeah, sign up for that if you feel like learning a little bit further there. So yeah, thank you, Helen, and to you all. We'll be in touch through an email and hopefully see you soon, and have a lovely evening or night or wherever you are in the world.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
If you do not already have an account with us, please contact our team and we will assist you. If you found this webinar helpful, please like and subscribe to our channel.